My name is Autumn Carter. I'm a trauma nurse, a survivor, and for 28 years, I was also the family assistant, invisible but always on call. I cooked the meals. I remembered the allergies. I cleaned the windows they never looked through. And when a truck crushed my car into twisted steel, my mother didn't come to the hospital. She said I'd always wanted independence, so I gave it to myself. I didn't rebuild out of revenge. I rebuilt because silence almost killed me. And I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Today I'm sitting beside a bookshelf my father built with his own hands, after learning the truth. I'm not the daughter they claimed. I'm the daughter they lost when I finally chose myself. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever carried a family on your back, only to realize they never saw you, stay a while. This story was made for you. Rain streaked down the kitchen window like silent accusations, smearing the faint light of a gray November morning. I had barely stepped out of my scrubs when the call came. No. How are you? No. Did you sleep? Just another list. Another obligation. I stared at my phone screen a second longer than usual before slipping it into my pocket, already knowing I'd comply. Again. The apartment smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt toast, a side effect of surviving night shifts and not bothering to cook. 12 hours on my feet in the ER, barely a moment to sit, and now I was digging through my cluttered fridge to see if I had anything salvageable for a cheese board. Of course I didn't. Of course I'd go out. I told myself I could rest tomorrow, but I always told myself that. Tomorrow never came. Fairmount was only 15 minutes away, but I drove slowly, watching the windshield wipers fight the rain with rhythmic futility. Susan's townhouse was nestled on a corner lot, pristine like a picture in a home magazine. It had always been her pride and joy. Immaculate, curated, performative. Unlike me. I carried the groceries up the slick stone steps, my fingers numbing around the cold paper bags. No one opened the door. I had the spare key, of course. I always did. The house was quiet, untouched. They weren't even here yet. I sighed, set the wine on the counter, and started prepping like a ghost in my mother's house. The flowers came out of their plastic wrap, roses and baby's breath. Safe. Non-daisy. I arranged them, not because anyone would notice, but because the thought of Vanessa sniffing in mock disgust later made my stomach twist. Better safe than insulted. I swept, vacuumed, fluffed pillows. Susan's linen napkins were starched and folded with precision. The chicken was marinating. By the time I set the table, the ache behind my eyes was pulsing. The front door opened with a gust of wind and perfume. "Oh," Susan said, stepping in and pulling off her gloves. "You're here already." Vanessa followed, swinging a tote bag and clicking across the hardwood in heeled boots. "That dress is new," she said, tossing her coat on the nearest chair. "Not bad, Autumn. Did you buy it, or did someone die and leave it to you?" I smiled without teeth. "Just something I found on sale." "Well, don't spill anything on it," she added. "Jeff's coming. He has allergies, so no daisies, okay?" I gestured to the bouquet on the table. Roses, and I already checked the ingredients on the appetizers. Susan walked around, inspecting my work with narrowed eyes. She didn't say thank you. She never did. "Did you polish the windows? The light catches all the streaks in this season." "It's raining," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. "I thought I'd wait till tomorrow." Susan settled onto the couch like a queen on her throne. "Then tomorrow it is." Vanessa poured herself a glass of the wine I bought. "It's weird how you always have time to help, Autumn," she said, swirling the liquid. "I mean, I have work, you know? A real schedule. I can't just float around doing chores." I wanted to laugh, or cry, but instead I stacked napkins. "I'm glad I could help." "That's what you're good at," Vanessa replied, not unkindly, just dismissively. "Reliable. That's what you are." They chatted on the sofa while I cleared up the last of the preparations. The kitchen sink was stacked with glasses, the ones Susan only brought out for guests. I started washing them, warm water rushing over my tired hands. A sharp sting cut through the dull ache. I looked down. A clean slice across my thumb, glass edge gleaming with red. I hissed, dropping the piece. Susan didn't look up from her magazine. "Don't forget to clean the windows tomorrow, they look dirty." Blood dripped into the basin, diluted by the water. I wrapped my thumb in a paper towel, pressing hard, bandaging myself. Like always. Like everything else. Vanessa laughed at something on her phone. I stared at the window above the sink. The rain blurred the world outside into muted grays and soft shadows. For a moment, I wondered what would happen if I simply vanished. If I stopped answering, stopped showing up, stopped being the glue. The reliable one. If one day I disappear, who will recognize me? Code red, female trauma patient, multiple fractures, internal bleeding. My name was not called. I was just another car accident, until a nurse shouted, "That's Autumn." Rain flooded the Philadelphia streets in angry waves, pooling at the corners of Broad Street where the headlights turned everything to glass and shadow. I had stayed late to pick up a prescription for one of my patients. I remember the red light. I remember gripping the wheel. I remember the flash. The truck didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It swallowed my small car whole, metal folding like paper. There was no pain. Just a roar and then silence, like someone had flipped the world off. The paramedics pulled me from the wreckage, calling out numbers that didn't make sense. My vitals, my blood pressure, my pulse, weak. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel anything. At Riverside Hospital, the ER buzzed like a beehive. Stretchers, gurneys, shouting voices. I was wheeled in with barely a glance. Code red, trauma, female, mid to late 20s, unresponsive. They rolled me past familiar faces, none of them registering me as someone more than a case file, until Lauren Kim glanced down and froze. "Oh my God, that's Autumn, Autumn Carter." She shoved the clipboard away and ran to my side. "We need Dr. Richards, now." The rush shifted. Suddenly there were hands, machines, barked orders, tubes down my throat, ice on my skin. I was cold and burning and nowhere at once. Lauren gripped my hand like she could anchor me to the world, whispering my name through clenched teeth. The CT scan revealed everything. Fractured ribs, internal bleeding, a collapsed lung. And then the line on the monitor stuttered. I was wheeled into surgery before the paperwork was signed. Lauren stayed. She always did. 2 hours later, I was in ICU, intubated, monitors humming. The room was dim, filled with antiseptic air and the beeping rhythm of borrowed time. Lauren sat beside me, not in scrubs anymore, but still in the hospital. She hadn't gone home. She hadn't showered. She was the one who called my emergency contact. Susan Carter answered on the second ring. "There's been an accident," Lauren said quietly. Susan exhaled, sharp, annoyed. "How bad?" "She's in a coma. We don't know if she'll wake up." Silence. "We're at Riverside ICU. Can you come?" "I'm at the spa," Susan said flatly. "With Vanessa. It's her pre-anniversary weekend." Lauren blinked. "Your daughter is in a coma." "She's an adult," Susan replied. "She always wanted to be independent. Let her be." Click. Dr. Richards stood at the door. "Family?" Lauren looked up, jaw clenched. "Unavailable." The older man nodded grimly. "We'll do what we can." For 3 days, it rained without pause. The gray light barely changed. The city kept moving. Cabs, buses, people walking under umbrellas, while I lay suspended in nothingness. Lauren returned every morning. She read the paper out loud, played soft jazz, brushed my hair back. She told me about patients, about a nurse who accidentally spilled coffee into a sharp spin, about a funny cat video trending on TikTok. She said my name again and again like it was a prayer or a defiance. On the third night, my hand twitched. She jumped. Then she leaned closer, watching. Autumn? Can you hear me? My eyelids fluttered, too heavy to lift. Somewhere deep in the fog, I heard her voice again. And another. Softer. Unfamiliar. You're not alone. My eyes opened. Just barely. A blink, nothing more. But it was real. Lauren stumbled back, shouting for Doctor Richards. Alarms beeped. Footsteps rushed in. I didn't see faces, only shapes. But I heard the voice. Her voice again. You're not alone. I didn't ask, why did Mom do that? I just asked, what about my dad? Does he know anything? The walls of the hospital room were pale, soft beige meant to calm, but they only reminded me of silence. 3 days had passed since I opened my eyes and the world had not shifted. Not really. I was alive. Lauren's chair was still next to my bed. My mother's voice still hadn't arrived in person. Vanessa's name had never been mentioned by anyone. I turned my face away from the window, looking at Lauren. Does he know? I asked, my voice raspy. My dad. Does he even know I was in an accident? She hesitated, like the answer wasn't hers to give. I called your mom again this morning, she said softly. She said she'd pass along the message if she got the chance. That wasn't a no. That wasn't a yes either. That was exactly what Susan Carter had always been. Vague, withholding, and cruel in a dress and heels. My dad used to write me letters, I whispered. Real ones, pen and paper. The only person who ever remembered my birthday without needing Facebook. Lauren watched me. Do you want to find him? I didn't say yes. I didn't have to. By that evening, we were at her apartment. She had insisted on signing me out early against the nurse's polite disapproval. She's healing faster at home, Lauren had told Dr. Richards. Because here, she's just a name on a chart. There, she's Autumn. Lauren's studio was warm with the scent of eucalyptus and cinnamon. She cleared a space on the small kitchen table, placed tea beside me, and handed me a pen. What do you want to say? I stared at the blank page. Dad, there's been an accident. But I'm writing to you now because I need to ask something you might not even know was hidden from you. I wrote slowly, careful with every word. I didn't write in anger. I wrote in facts. The accident, the silence, the mother who never called him, the sister who didn't visit. I didn't ask him to fix it. I just asked him to know, to see me, finally. Lauren found the corporate mailing address of Carter Engineering Group, the place my father had worked for 23 years, the company Susan said he had transferred out of 2 years ago. Vancouver, she claimed. I had never questioned it. Lauren's call reached someone named Lorraine. She remembered my name. He's still based in Chicago, Lorraine said gently. He travels a lot, but he's here. Would you like me to pass something along? We mailed the letter. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in Lauren's guest cot. Memories came like frostbite. The time Susan refused to hang my painting at the family reunion because it clashed with the decor. The way Vanessa's birthday always had cake and mine had takeout. My father's letters, every month, folded in thirds, always ending with, proud of you, pumpkin. I needed more than words now. I needed proof. I needed to understand the cracks under our family's foundation. I began collecting. Audio. I recorded the next call from Susan, when she casually lied about my father being off-grid in the Yukon. She didn't know I had already spoken to Lorraine. Emails. I asked Lauren to help me recover an old Yahoo account Susan once used. There were fragments of conversations, dated 2 years prior, referring to the other child and money transfers. DNA. Vanessa had left her scarf at the hospital when she'd visited Susan that one time. Not to see me, just to deliver hair products. She'd tossed it carelessly on a chair. I sealed it in a bag. 3 days later, I sat with the lab report in my hand. Lauren stood behind me. She didn't say anything. The result? Non-paternal event indicated. Probability of shared father, 0%. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the truth that had always floated under the surface, like oil in water. The final letter I wrote was longer, detailed. I attached the report. I printed email chains. I listed timelines. I stated what had happened, what had not, and most importantly, what had been stolen. I held the envelope in both hands, breathing slowly. I almost died, I whispered. But this is how I came back to life. With the truth. That morning, in another part of the country, a plane taxied toward the gate at Philadelphia International. Richard Carter stepped out, no luggage in hand. Just a weathered envelope clutched tightly in his coat pocket. His daughter's handwriting, still fresh. Vanessa isn't your daughter. My father was speechless, but his hands were clenched as if he were trying to hold together a family that had just disintegrated before his eyes. The afternoon light slanted through the bay window of the Fairmount living room, casting pale gold across the shelves lined with curated trinkets, designer books no one had read, and photos that now meant far less than they used to. The room was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that followed an explosion. The debris still settling, the echo still caught in the walls. Richard Carter stood in the center of the room, a single envelope in his hand. It had already been opened. The papers inside had been read, reread, then placed on the coffee table with deliberate calm. A calm that hid something else. Rage, maybe. Or something colder. Susan Carter sat across from him, still in her silk blouse and pearl earrings, her composure cracking at the edges. She looked like she had when she gave speeches at fundraising galas. Poised, persuasive, confident in her own narrative. But this wasn't a speech, and she was losing the audience. "You're being dramatic," she said, her tone clipped. "Whatever Autumn sent you, it's clearly taken out of context. She's emotional. She always has been." Richard didn't move. "I've seen the lab results." "It's a mistake," Susan insisted. "Or a forgery. You know how she gets. She's been unstable since college. You said it yourself, she always had that melancholy streak." "Stop." The word hit like a door slamming shut. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Vanessa sat curled on the edge of the couch, her expression frozen somewhere between confusion and dread. She had picked up the envelope 10 minutes ago, flipped through the documents and dropped them like they burned. Now her fingers were locked together in her lap, twisting in silence. "You never told me," Richard said slowly, turning back to Susan. "Not once. Not after all these years. I didn't think it mattered." He stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Susan stood, stepping forward. "I raised them both. I gave them everything. I did what was best for this family." "For who?" Richard snapped, the first edge of anger surfacing. "For you?" Susan's mouth opened, then closed. "You lied," he continued, each word heavier than the last. "You let me believe Vanessa was mine. You told Autumn I had moved away. You kept me in the dark while she was in the ICU. She didn't tell you that part, did she?" Susan's voice wavered. "She just wants to punish me." "She almost died," he said. The room went still. "She almost died, and none of you showed up. You buried her long before she even stopped breathing." Vanessa flinched. Susan's shoulders slumped. Richard took a breath and turned toward the stack of papers on the table. "I've already spoken with my lawyer. The divorce will be filed by Monday. Financial support ends immediately. Any joint assets are frozen. I've placed the accounts and properties into conservatorship, temporarily, until I'm sure they won't be used against her again." "You can't—" Susan stepped forward, but he didn't move. "I can, and I have." "But we're a family." "No, Susan. You built a performance, and you let it rot behind the curtains." He reached into his coat and pulled out a second envelope. "This is for Autumn. She'll decide what to do next." Vanessa looked up. "Dad." He didn't answer. He looked at her. Just once. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was absence. Then he walked out. The front door closed with a soft thud, but it might as well have been an earthquake. Neither Susan nor Vanessa moved. The papers remained on the coffee table, silent and damning. A few blocks away, in a quiet corner of Philadelphia, Autumn Carter sat in Lauren's apartment, sipping weak tea and staring out at the rain. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Lorraine. "Your father is in Philadelphia. He's asking for your address." Dad knocked on Lauren's door just as I was putting away a pile of old medical books. "I brought a hammer. If you want to rebuild something." I stood still for a second, unsure whether the sound in my chest was fear or hope. Maybe both. I opened the door. He looked older than I remembered. His beard grayer, his eyes a little deeper set. But his hands were the same. Strong, warm. Holding no flowers, no gifts. Just a tool. Lauren smiled gently as she passed by us with her coffee mug. "I'll go walk Sunny," she said. "Take your time." We sat on the floor. I had no energy for chairs. The bookshelves around Lauren's studio were mismatched, some built by hand, some repurposed crates. But they held stories. Mine had never been given a place. "When I was little," I said, "I asked Mom why she didn't give me a shelf for my books. She said I didn't have anything to show off." He winced. "I believed her," I added. "For a long time." Richard didn't try to excuse it. He didn't defend her. He looked down at the hammer he had brought, then gently set it aside. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not because I yelled, or didn't visit, but because I trusted someone who made you invisible. And I did nothing while she erased you." He took a breath, looked around the small apartment. "Susan always found a way to pull me from you. She'd tell me you didn't want me to come to your games, that you were too busy for letters, that you'd said not to call. She said you were in Canada. She said I was too disappointed in you to visit." We were both quiet. I didn't cry. I couldn't. There were no tears left for what I already knew. "Do you believe in me?" I asked. He looked up. His voice cracked, but his eyes didn't waver. "I've believed in you since the day you were born. I just haven't been strong enough to stand up for what I believe." There was a folder in his coat pocket. He slid it across the floor to me. A single sheet was clipped to the front. "I had my attorney draft this," he said. "It transfers your personal assets into a trust. Your name, your control. From now on, no one can sign for you. Not even me." I stared at it. For a moment, it didn't feel real. Then it did. "I don't want your money," I said quietly. "This isn't about money," he replied. "It's about never having to ask for permission again." I nodded. He glanced at the cluttered table behind me where a small paper-wrapped box sat unopened. Susan's handwriting on the envelope. "She sent you something?" "Yeah. Are you going to open it?" I walked over, picked it up, and opened a drawer. Without another word, I slid the letter inside and shut it. I will not let anyone else control my pain. Richard nodded slowly. He didn't ask what was in it. He didn't reach for it. Outside, the wind stirred, brushing dry leaves against the window. Inside, we picked up the hammer together. Not to fix anything, but to finally build something that was ours. The first winter in the new apartment. No more screaming, no more chandeliers or crystal glasses. Just me, the small Christmas tree, and a new picture frame hanging on the wall. The radiator rattled gently as the steam kicked in, warming the windows just enough to blur the outline of Charles Gate Park outside. Boston was quiet under its fresh coat of snow. Inside, the scent of cinnamon tea drifted through the room, blending with pine and ginger from the small gifts scattered across the table. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I sat cross-legged on the floor, a soft blanket draped around my shoulders, and stared at the photo I'd hung above the bookshelf. It wasn't expensive, just a simple wooden frame I'd found at a weekend market. But the photo inside, me, Lauren and my father smiling beneath autumn leaves, was worth more than anything that had ever hung in our old Fairmount house. In the bottom right corner, Lauren had written in her careful handwriting, "Real family." I smiled. There was a cardboard box beside the coffee table, neatly labeled in Sharpie. Letters. Inside it were hospital bills, old cards, half-written notes, and the unopened envelope from my mother. It had been sitting there for weeks. I reached for it, held it in my hand for a moment, and then placed it at the very bottom of the box. Some letters didn't need to be read. Some wounds didn't need to be reopened to know they were real. Lauren arrived first, carrying a tray of cookies and a bright red scarf wrapped around her neck like armor against the cold. "I hope you're hungry," she said, nudging the door closed with her foot. "These are technically for Santa, but you strike me as more deserving." I laughed. I don't know if I believe in Santa anymore. "Good," she said. "Believe in yourself instead." An hour later, a few of my old colleagues from Riverside arrived. Jackie from ER, Neil from recovery. None of them stayed long, but their presence was warm, casual, a reminder that not every connection had to be built from pain. And then Dad came. He looked different in jeans and a puffer jacket, his hair dusted with flakes of snow. He set a small box on the floor and gave me a crooked smile. "Thought I'd add something," he said. It was a bookshelf, a simple one, built from pine. He began assembling it in the corner of the room just beneath the window where the morning light would hit. "You don't need an inheritance," I said quietly, watching him work. "But you need a life where you don't have to pay for the mistakes of others." He paused for a moment, then kept working. "I'm starting now." By the time he was done, the room looked fuller. Not cluttered, but rooted. I placed one book on the top shelf, my old medical journal, dog-eared, underlined, mine. Beside it, I set down a small wooden box. I had painted it myself, messy and imperfect. A mailbox. My mailbox. For the first time in my life, I had a place to put things that belonged to me. Memories, thoughts, beginnings. A place to write letters that didn't need to be sent to be real. That night, after everyone left and the city had quieted, I sat alone with a cup of tea and opened my laptop. I clicked on the draft I'd saved months ago, an anonymous article I'd posted to a medical forum. The title read, "If I die quietly, please ask why no one heard me." My phone buzzed on the table. An unfamiliar number. A voice came through the line, warm but uncertain. "Hi, is this Autumn Carter? I'm with Waverly Press. We read something you wrote online. We don't know who you are, but we think more people need to." There was a time when Autumn Carter believed that love could be earned, that if she worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, and gave endlessly, the people around her would finally see her. For 28 years, she was the one who showed up, who paid the bills no one acknowledged, who fixed broken things without ever being thanked. And when the cost of that silence nearly took her life, the people who should have cared never even came to the hospital. But the truth doesn't wait forever. When Autumn woke up from the coma, something inside her had changed, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in the quiet refusal to keep being invisible. It began with a single question, one she whispered to herself like a dare. What if they were wrong about me all along? And then, she moved. She didn't scream or demand public justice. She wrote, she listened, she uncovered. Piece by piece, she reconstructed a version of her life not shaped by guilt or obligation, but by evidence and intention. A DNA test. A letter. A silence that cut deeper than any insult. And finally, the moment when truth, undeniable, paper-bound and signed, reached the man who was supposed to protect her. In one living room, a family unraveled. In another, a new one began to take root. Richard Carter didn't bring money to his daughter that morning in Boston. He brought a hammer, and with it, an unspoken apology for all the shelves that were never built, all the spaces that had remained empty because no one had believed she was worth filling them. Autumn didn't ask for revenge. She asked for a life of her own. and for once, someone handed it to her without conditions. She didn't open her mother's letter, not out of cruelty, but because pain doesn't deserve another invitation. She didn't post a viral story or stage a press conference. Instead, she planted roots. Slowly, deliberately. A small apartment by Charles Gate Park. A new photo frame on the wall. A mailbox she made with her own hands. And when someone finally read her anonymous article, "If I die quietly, please ask why no one heard me." It wasn't fame she sought. It was confirmation that her story mattered, that she was no longer living in a world that demanded her silence. Her journey was never about punishing the ones who betrayed her. It was about refusing to carry their sins any longer. Because sometimes, the most radical form of justice is simply walking away, whole, unashamed, and seen. Justice, when rooted in truth, does not need applause to be real. It just needs the courage of someone willing to break the cycle. Autumn's life didn't end in a courtroom or a confession. It ended in a living room where a woman no longer needed anyone's permission to exist. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is to stop asking to be chosen and choose themselves instead. If you've ever felt like the background character in your own family, if you've ever poured yourself into people who never looked up, then maybe you understand this truth. You don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You don't need their apology to move forward. You just need one quiet moment of clarity and the courage to never hand your power away again. If this story touched something in you, leave a comment. Tell me who you had to walk away from, or who helped you find your way back. And subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard, especially by the ones who've been told to stay quiet their whole lives. Double asterisk.